I'm Chief Michael LeBourdais, Chief of the Whistler Pines Clinton Indian Band here at Whistler Pines Indian Reserve number 4. What I'm responsible for is everything that the federal and provincial and municipal governments are responsible for. So that's health, education, everything, childcare, you name it. All of that is what First Nations chiefs and councils are required by their communities to look after, not necessarily required by or enjoyed by the provinces. In Canada, the province likes to take the jurisdiction over children, and the federal government likes to offload a lot of their responsibilities to the province, like health, that kind of thing. So it's a fascinating job. It's unlike any other in Canada, I think, you know. It's if it was easy, somebody would have perfected it by now. Well, the pipe goes, well, right from Edmonton to Burrard, but it passes through our reserve. It goes right beside my sister's house, my uncle's property over here, my mother's property, my other uncle and cousin's property. So we've been living beside it since we got here in 1972. And so we always had a pretty good relationship with those guys that run it. Mr. Collins used to come out and he used to help us do some fencing. He'd come out and when we had rodeos and barbecues and stuff like that. I think he's coming out to make sure we didn't dig up the pipe, but there was a good relationship we had with him. And so it was always something that we always lived with, and we were very comfortable on how TMX run that. The operations guys, they were always with us here. So I had a very high comfort level with the operators. And so when 2007 came and Kinder Morgan bought the pipe from Fortis at the time, and they operated it as Terracin. There wasn't any consultation, and so that led to some friction between us and Kinder Morgan. And so he comes in and he says, we bought the pipe. I said, no, you didn't. And he says, yeah, we did. And I said, no, you didn't. And so we were arguing like little kids. And he says, well, what makes you think I didn't buy it? And I said, well, if you bought it, we would have been notified. Consultation is a requirement under Delgamuuk. And so his lawyer fought my lawyer. The other 11 communities that the pipe goes through, Kamloops Indian Band, Lower Nicola, drops down into the Fraser, and there's some Fraser Valley bands that the pipe goes through and it ends up in Burrard. They all joined me with engaging with Kinder Morgan around consultation and accommodation. Mostly we were just trying to figure out who owns the right-of-way for tax purposes, right? So that kind of thing. And so what it boiled down to is 5 years later, I think it was December 2012, we were in Vancouver at a meeting with Kinder Morgan, their legal team, and us and our lawyers, and the chiefs and lawyers on one side, Kinder Morgan on the other side, and I asked Ian, can we talk alone? And my lawyer opposed to it, and I said, listen, you work for me, get out. And so he kicked out his lawyer, and so it was just Ian and I in a room. He says, what do you want? And I said, oh, I want you to respect my jurisdiction. You know, we've been here for 10,000 years, so I want you to invest in my elders. It doesn't cost you anything to invest in my elders. You get to write that off. Reduce your tax transfers to Ottawa by investing in my elders. I want you to invest in my students. Indian Affairs doesn't give us anywhere close to enough money to send our students to the university and trade college. So I want you to invest in those guys because you will get a tax-deductible receipt and it will not cost you anything. You'll still make as much profit as you're supposed to make. But I said, mostly I want you to keep the damn oil in the pipe. And he said, yeah, I can do all of those things. And so we called my lawyer back in, he called his lawyer back in, everybody else came back in, and I said, we're not fighting each other anymore. We're going to talk about a benefits agreement that will mutually benefit both of us. and therein rose the term mutual benefits agreement. And so we negotiated an agreement around joint management. So we have an oversight committee that meets once a quarter with Kinder Morgan, either operations or the ownership. They invest, they will provide investment funds for our students to go to post-secondary school, whether it be trades or regular university. They can do that. Because right now, Indian Affairs, if I have a youth that wants to be a welder, no help from Ottawa. And so that's why these agreements are important, because it fills those gaps, very large gaps that Ottawa leaves alone. And so, and that's what I want out of that agreement. And so those would have been direct payments to Whispering Pines. And so the other bands started negotiating the same or similar agreements with us. And so that's kind of why you have so much support by First Nations for this project. Because if the project doesn't happen, the benefits don't flow. Initially, there was a lot of opposition to it. On TV, not along the pipe. So there was some opposition by some of our NGO representatives that went beyond what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to engage the provincial and federal governments on specific claims, engage the federal governments on comprehensive claims. And so they took some liberties and joined in a protest saying, we're against this. And we phoned them up and said, no, we're not. And so that quieted down quite a bit. We had the changeover in the provincial government where they were using, the First Nations are against us. And again, it's like, no, we have agreement with this corporation. We're not against it. There is one that is against it. There's one that hasn't finished an agreement with them. And then there's another one that is opposed to the route. And so we're trying to engage those ones so that we can address those concerns. But by and large, the NGOs and the provinces have finally vacated. The Indians are opposed to this because we're actively trying to buy the pipe. We've engaged with funds from New York. We've talked to 3 of the Canadian chartered banks about how do we buy it using debt and equity. And so they're providing us models on how to do that. We've talked to the shippers, so that's Suncor, Imperial, CNRL, all those guys who use the pipe to get their oil to Tidewater, and getting letters of support from them or support from them. We've engaged with the province of Alberta, getting support from them on how to purchase the pipe. Because we want to buy the pipe, not because we want to be oil barons, but what we want is the economic benefit, the fiscal benefit, and most importantly, the environmental oversight, right? So that we can be satisfied that this pipe continues to be operated in a safe manner, so that when we're transporting oil to the Tidewater, it's done so very, very safely. And that's the whole reason for doing this. We do have emergency training for our band members. So Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain comes out to our community, brings in those that are interested. All of my guys are interested because they think it's cool, right? So and we go up and down, we practice putting booms out in the river. Our neighbor to the north here, Simp, has an emergency preparedness team with all the equipment there inside their brand new fire hall provided by Kinder Morgan. And we're ready. We practice and we train. We have in our agreement made in full, right? So if anything gets wrecked, they have to remake it to us in full. And so a pipe bursts and destroys our 2,000 acre Indian reserve, they have to provide another 2,000 acre Indian reserve to us. However, that's the very worst scenario. And so we had that dealt with in our agreement. And so what we try to do is minimize the possibility of that happen, is by not having an accident today. Right? Not today. Wake up every morning, not today. And so you just string enough todays together, it goes on forever. Well, here we're a resource-based economy. Straight up. We don't have Microsofts or Apple or anything like that. It's not technology-based, it's not transportation, it's resource. And so what we want here is the same as what the province and the feds want. We are without treaty. We want Delgamuukw and the Williams case. We have the Peaceal case before the courts now. And so that describes the First Nations have ownership of this area. Now, corporations are finally understanding that. They're quit hiding behind the province, quit hiding behind the feds. The courts have articulated, go talk to the Indians, right? And so they're doing that. And so they're starting to pay us taxes, they're starting to pay us revenue, those kinds of things. And so that's all we wanted. We're okay with commerce. We're okay with forestry companies harvesting trees so that Americans and Chinese and Canadians can build homes. We just want to make sure that the trees are replanted, that they're not violating any sacred sites. You couldn't do this. Even in the 60s, 50s and 60s, we had no voice. I remember the McMillan-Bloedel protests in the 70s. My uncles were in that. My friends' grandmothers were in that, and they were getting arrested, right? Because we weren't opposed to the harvesting of the trees, we were opposed to being left out of it economically, and we were opposed that some of the sites they were harvesting were sacred sites. And so that's changed. Today, Whispering Pines, together with some other bands, has a forest license. So we have a forest license to harvest 2 million cubic meters of trees, but it is so environmentally sensitive that a lot of foresters said it's not sustainable. Well, we're halfway through. We've harvested 1 million. So far, so good. And so you can do this and respect the environment and respect those sacred sites. You can have commerce too. And so then the other step is the mines. You have the Yellowhead, we have a gold mine up here, you have New Gold, Ajax, Constantia, Highland. All of these are finally understanding they have to have agreement with the First Nations. And to get agreement, you have to explain very carefully your environmental stewardship. Because without the environment, none of this means anything. And so they come to us now and talk to us about how do we conduct business in your territory. That's very simple. Pay your taxes, give us some economic enjoyment, whether it be jobs or revenue sharing or what have you, and don't screw up the environment. Pretty simple, right? And they're getting it, right? Before, not so much. It was just, this is what we're going to do. That was the consultation part. There was never an accommodation part, right? And so now it's consultation and accommodation. We're moving towards free, prior, and informed consent. We're not there yet, but we're moving towards that. And all that requires is that everybody has a good understanding. And by everybody, I mean the councils, like me, my neighbors to Simc, Kamloops, and those along the pipeline have a very good understanding how this pipeline works, or how a forestry license works, or how a mining license works. That's all that is. And so once everybody's comfortable with it, we can carry on. Climate change has always been a reality to First Nations, particularly here in the Shuswap Nation interior on the what we call the Green Lake Plateau, the Bonaparte Plateau. The reason why this is flat is because it used to be under 600-700 feet of ice. and so it crushed down this area flat. And so there used to be 700 feet of ice here. It's gone now. It melted, and it melted because global warming, temperature change, call it what you will. We understand that our climate changes and that affects the land. When you go to Kamloops and you see it, the hoodoos, we call it the hoodoos, and what that means is river bottom. It's where Kamloops sits now is 600 feet below where the bottom of the river used to be. 1,500, 2,000 years ago. Used to be a lake there. Now it's river bottom. And so that was long before pipelines and diesel engines and all that kind of stuff. And so we understand climate change is continually. You have to change. And there's only two things you can do. You can adapt or perish. And so we choose to adapt. And that's what we're going to do with this climate change as well. We'll just adapt and get on with our day. Make sure that it's safe and everybody makes it home. It is getting this dialogue national, right? When I came in, I came out of the banking industry, commercial loans, helping entrepreneurs, because I thought if you could own your own business, have your own income, you would be separated from Canada, from chief and council and all that stuff. That's not the case. You still have Canada and chief and council with some kind of jurisdiction over your business. And so for me, what my biggest accomplishment is probably awareness. Raising the awareness that First Nations are about jurisdiction. When First Nations are protesting something and they can't articulate what it is they don't like, it's because they're not getting to enjoy that particular jurisdiction, whether it be over land, water, children, school, whatever it is. And so for me, it's always been trade. When you look back at our history, we spoke earlier of the Chinook language. The reason why we have the Chinook language is because to do trade between the Stoney Nakoda and the coastal First Nations, you'd have to speak 3 languages: Stoney Nakoda, Shuswap, and then a coastal language. Or you all speak Chinook. And so that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to accomplish, to get everybody on the same page, on the same playing level, so that we can enjoy that trade and that jurisdiction that we once did, whether it be with the Stoney Nakoda or Canadians or Japanese or Chinese, and so that we can all have a better tomorrow just by understanding and enjoying that jurisdiction that we have inherently, because we never gave that territory up. We want to cooperate and work in concert with Canada and the provinces and with our neighbors to have a better tomorrow, so that we're better educated, better environment, and a brighter future. It's just that simple.